Welcome back to my summary and personal analysis of Franz Kafka's The Castle. This is part 2 and we're dealing with pages 103 to 198. We will take a look at chapter 7 all the way up to chapter 14. But first I need to change my clothes because this is gonna take some time and I'm already getting hot. In the last chapter we talked about Kay just talked to the Bridge Inn's hostess. In the end, Kay got her manipulated the way he wanted to and he is on his way to Frida. He enters the Bridge Inn room and sees that Frida made a home out of it. She has arranged everything in a nice manner, even put a tablecloth on the small table they have. Kay meets Frida and the teacher sitting at the table. He basically ignores the teacher and tells Frida to get his clothes ready because he's heading out for another meeting. After some time, Kay finally addresses the teacher and the teacher is there to make him an offer. He says that he got sent by the church warden to propose that Kay could become school servant, which is something like a janitor and also entails living inside the school. Kay doesn't plan on taking this job offer. He tells the teacher no. The teacher is glad about this because he makes no secret out of his aversion towards this idea that the church warden has, and he also says that he believes that Kay deserves no support and that he's just useless as a surveyor and he would also be useless as a school servant, so he plans on leaving. Frida then takes Kay aside, tells him to wait a second, goes out the door and gets the teacher back. She then talks to Kay and says, honestly, my dear, before you came in and talked to the hostess talked to me and she plans on kicking us out. To be precise, on kicking you out. Because Frida used to work at the Bridge Inn, the hostess is kind of connected to her and tells her, okay, you can stay here, but your fiancé has to leave because he's my enemy, I don't like Kay. He doesn't understand the way things are supposed to go. So basically Kay is homeless now. But Kay just says, I'm gonna deal with it another way. You can stay here and I'll take care of it. And then Frida, in a very feminine, indirect, clever way, says, or you could just accept the offer as school servant and then if you find something better, just quit. But Kay wants to keep his manly pride and he accepts, but he says, I won't tell it to the teacher directly. The teacher is obviously annoyed by all of this. Frida then turns around and says, of course, he'll take the job and we're very glad, thank you for your support, all that. The teacher doesn't really believe her but says, okay, I guess I accept. If you accept, I kind of have to because the church warden told me to. And Kay just stands in the corner like a little kid. Meanwhile, the assistants do their childish games as always. They were supposed to get Kay's clothes, but they forgot about it and just start having lunch. So Frida just laughs about them, takes the clothes and irons them for Kay. But Kay makes a mental note that he has to talk to Frida about how she's treating the assistants too nicely. And then he leaves. In this chapter we see that Frida is getting more comfortable as the fiancé of Kay. We see kind of her role as a traditional wife. We see that she doesn't want to tell Kay what to do, but that she influences him and outwits him sometimes. We see that the teacher doesn't like Kay and is obviously opposing him. We see that Kay has kind of this manly pride and he's in the flow of networking and moving things. He's just kind of running around aimlessly, but this way of action makes him feel like he's moving something because he's moving around. We see how the hostess works against Kay in an indirect way. We have the kind of plus-minus neutral game that we always have when Kay talks to someone. So he got some leverage because the church warden acknowledged that he has to have some place to stay and he needs to have a place to work at. But at the same time he becomes the subordinate of the teacher who doesn't like him. And maybe most importantly, we get some foreshadowing regarding the relationship of Frida and Kay with the mental note of Kay regarding the assistants. In the following chapter, Kay goes to the officials' inn. He boldly enters and goes to the bar where he met Frida. A new girl works there now. Her name is Pepi. She is a small girl of a rounder format, but she's pretty, and Kay kind of likes her appearance, but he doesn't really care about her. She talks about how she doesn't like the work at the bar and that she doesn't believe that it's a nice work. Kay just says that Frida did it in a very nonchalant way and that she was kind of born for it. And then Pepi warns him that Frida is very good at keeping up a facade and that it's most likely that Frida didn't really like the work as well, but she's just really good at acting. And Pepi says it in a very ominous way, like a warning to Kay. But like I said, Kay doesn't really care about her. He's there to encounter Clum. He's looking for the peephole to look into the back room where Clum said when Kay was at the officials inn for the first time, but he doesn't find it, kind of like it vanished together with Frida. He then makes up a lie about wanting to get a tablecloth that Frida left there on the table, which is obviously a lie because in the last chapter Frida took that tablecloth and put it on the table at the Bridge Inn. Pepi then says, oh yeah, I know that tablecloth. And then Kay says, yeah, but I don't want to go into the back room because maybe there is someone. For example, Clum, he used to sit there to kind of get information out of Pepi. And then Pepi just says, nah, he's not there. Clum is leaving shortly, like soon. His coach, his sled is already in the yard. And then Kay just ignores her and leaves into the yard. At the officials inn yard, it's very dark, but Kay can make out a sled with a coachman sitting atop it. And then he like goes over very nonchalantly. So he doesn't act like he has a goal, but he walks over there and looks at him a bit, at the coachman, and then just like leans against the wall. And he's basically waiting for Clum to come outside and enter the sled. But then nothing really moves. So Kay just sits down and eats sausage and bread that Frida gave him as a lunch, as dinner. And then after a while, after he finishes, he just kind of awkwardly stands there and the coachman just says, it will take a while. And Kay doesn't understand and asks what will take a while, and the coachman says, until you leave. But then after some while again, the coachman says, you want some cognac? It's pretty cold. Kay accepts, and the coachman tells him that it is hard for him to get off because he has on multiple furs and it would just take too long to get off for him. So he asks Kay to get inside and to get the cognac because it's right at the inside the door. So Kay says, yeah, he obliges. He goes to the carriage. He enters because he would like to see what it looks inside. The door slams shut behind him, and inside he says he sees pelts and he sees furs and big pillows, so it's very luxurious, it's very warm. And then he just grabs behind him and gets a bottle of cognac. At first he smells it, and then he takes a sip, then he has like this warm fuzzy feeling, takes another sip. So he's just like having a luxurious kind of time in there, just enjoying the cognac, laying on all the soft stuff inside. And then he looks outside and sees that the light is turning on above the door to the yard. He gets scared because he thinks someone's coming. He rushes out of the carriage. He drops the cognac, he slams the door shut, and cognac is dripping out of the door. And the young man is standing in front of him and says, how did you get here? And Kay just says, I walked in through the door, nothing really happened. He can't really explain why he's there basically. And then the young man says, come inside, follow me. And Kay says, no, I have business here, I'm waiting here. And the young man then orders him again, follow me. Kay doesn't oblige. So the young man tells the coachman to put the horses back into the stable and wait for further orders. And the coachman just looks at Kay, tired, and then in slow motion gets everything back into the stable. The young man waits for a while for Kay and then slowly walks inside the inn again. So it all seems like the first time Kay was at the officials' inn and talked to the innkeeper. People walking away, looking at him like he has the power to order them back. But Kay wants to show his power by not reacting and just stands there, stands his ground, waiting for Clum. Both men left and the light is turned down. And he feels like he got a win, but a meaningless one. In this chapter, Kay is on the offense, obviously. He enters the officials in on his own. He enters the bar like he owns the place. He almost ignores Pepe. He's looking for the peephole openly. He goes into the yard, despite him knowing that it's kind of forbidden to enter rooms that no one allowed you to enter. He hangs around in the yard, and then he's almost too much on the offense. He's almost offensive because he enters the sled and like lays down despite it being Clum's property. He drinks the alcohol and he makes everything dirty. The coachman and the young man are more indirect. He may be on the offense that he chose, but it almost seems vulgar because the coachman just tells him, you're kind of a nuisance, you would stay here and it's super meaningless. And then the young man says, you may wait here, but no matter whether you leave or stay here, there's no way you will meet the person you're waiting for. So basically, he knows what Kay's plan is and kind of indirectly shows him that, tells him that. And in the end, he's just alone standing in the snow. So a lot of fuss and a lot of noise over nothing. Another thing we learn is how Kay gets more lusty and insecure with his relationship. So even though Pepe is a nuisance to him, so the girl that works at the bar now, and he thinks that she's kind of like stupid and too young to understand, he also has lusty thoughts about her, and we hear his inner monologue that he would like to embrace her round body. And then he tells himself, oh no, it's not the same with Frida, it's not the circumstances, it's not just young girls working in this position. I love Frida and it's more than her body. But then he closes his eyes because he's scared that he's looking at Pepe in a lusty way and he's trying to calm himself down. So kind of the animal inside the man. This further intensifies the struggles or maybe like the conflict that will come in the future between Frida and Kay. After realizing the meaninglessness of Kay's win in the yard, he goes back in the inn. He wants to leave, but the innkeeper points him towards the bar. And inside he meets Pepe, the young man who ordered him around in the yard, and the hostess from the bridge inn. They kind of ignore him. Pepe kind of only starts to see him when he's standing right in front of her, right in front of the bar. The young man is sitting in front of a table full of documents and papers, and the hostess is just sitting there and enjoying the official aura. But then she gets very excited, runs towards a door that is on the side of the yard and looks through the keyhole, and she's like super excited, breathing heavily, fixing her hair up, like touching herself up. Pepe and the official man, or like the young man, take turns also looking through the keyhole, but most of the time the hostess is looking through the keyhole, and we can kind of guess who that is. And Kay also knows, and then he just says, Clum must have left. The young man says that that's the truth, but that Clum seemed kind of anxious, looking around when he went to his coach, trying to like make Kay feel guilty, I guess. But the hostess calmed down again and she chimes in and she says, nah, Clum doesn't care about someone like Kay. No, it can't be true that he was nervous. I guess he was just busy. And even if he seemed insecure, that's just us normal mortal people projecting our insecurities on him, which again underlines this notion of the hostess that Kay is this otherworldly being. But finally, the young man gets to business and introduces himself as Momus, the secretary of Clum at the village. But then he explains that he's one of the secretaries of Clum, so it's not that exclusive. But then the hostess makes the point that Momus is still very important. Momus asks Kay to give some statements regarding his stay at the village so far. He says that this is standard procedure and that it's just for his documents, so everything is written down the way it should be written down. And then he emphasizes, and also the hostess emphasizes, how Clum doesn't really care about all the documents and that he never looks at them, that they're just there to be there. It's not like important for his work. But then the hostess also says, oh, remember Kay, we talked about how I could use my connections at the castle to get you in contact with Clum. This is my part of the deal. So just talk to Momus, say what your life was like in the village up until now, and then you have like this slight chance that it's just in the atmosphere, in the aura of Clum. Which he also emphasizes that Clum most likely won't care. And then Kay says, okay, so you're telling me to do this, but it's meaningless, so I'm a leave. And then Momus again says, no, stay here, the official procedure is important, talk to me in Clum's name. Again, we have in Clum's name, which seems like a play on in God's name. And then they talk a bunch, and then Momus again says that that's just his work and he wants to do his work and he's not questioning it. And the host is emphasizing how important Momus is. And then Kay again says, nah, I'm a leave. You're telling me that this is meaningless, I will leave. You provided no reasons whatsoever, and then he's leaving. Momus gets super nervous, almost scared. The hostess says, nah, he wouldn't dare to leave. But Kay's already outside the bar. So he's in the hall, where he meets the innkeeper, who's also very nervous and says, oh, is the interview already over? Kay says, there was no interview, I'm leaving. And then the innkeeper is even more nervous and tells him that he should have done it. And then Kay is kind of insecure. The innkeeper tries to loosen up the atmosphere and says, it's not like the end of the world just because you didn't do it. But he just does this to like kind of sympathize with Kay. And then Kay laughs and says, yo, the way the weather is looking, it doesn't seem like the world is ending. And then Kay leaves the officials in. Kay takes a step forward because he meets someone who's higher up in the hierarchy of the castle. He's talking to the secretary Momus. Momus sees his work as meaningless but important, so it's a paradox, but he doesn't seem to care. It's just the way things are supposed to go. Kay is asked to contribute to this protocol, but he's not really up for it. We again see the worship of the hostess regarding Clum. The way Clum is presented makes him seem very anxious and insecure. There is still no sign of immediate consequences for not following the official procedure. It seems like the bureaucracy is only there to keep up the social hierarchy and to instill feelings of ambiguity, insecurity, and status. Even though everyone seems to notice, it's so ambiguous that you either have most of the peasants that just fall victim to it and like don't care and become passive, or you have certain individuals like the hostess who dream of the upper echelons of the bureaucracy. And it seems like this substitute religion almost. But even when the peasants don't care, it appears as any small connection to the castle is a treasure and has to be acknowledged as one. Kay again leaves into the night and the world seems to end. The weather quickly changes and makes it very hard for Kay to move towards the bridge inn, but he sees two lights in the distance, so he hurries towards them, but he's very sad after realizing that it's just the assistants who ran after him. But he gets pleasantly surprised because right behind them he sees his messenger Barnabas. Barnabas even has a letter from Clum. So after Clum avoided him in the last chapter, we now have direct communication. As direct as it can be with communication from the castle. So Kay immediately opens up the letter. Inside, Clum says that he's doing great work, that he should keep it up, that the assistants are doing well, that he's keeping an eye on Kay, and that he just should continue the work as he's doing it right now. Kay's furious. Kay can't believe it. All this work that he has done culminated in this letter that seems to be based on things that are not the case. He gets super angry. He shouts at the assistants. He tells Barnabas that he sucks as a messenger, that he should go to Clum and tell him that Kay wants a direct dialogue with him and that he accepts every condition that Clum sets, and even if he only gets 10 seconds to explain himself, and that he wants to see Clum in person no matter what. And Barnabas just smiles and says, yeah, I will bring this message to Clum together with your first message. And Kay can't believe it again. The message that he gave Barnabas at the beginning of the book still hasn't made its way into the castle, nowhere near Clem. Kay questions the work of Barnabas and asks him if he's really doing his job the best way he can. And Barnabas kind of gives excuses and he says, yeah, this message, I didn't even get it. Amalia, my sister, brought it when she was in the castle. And I have to help my dad because he's a shoemaker and I have to like support my family and all that. And Clem doesn't really like messengers, so it's not very urgent when I go to the castle. Kay then asks whether Amalia could bring his message into the castle, and then Barnabas explains that she has no way of entering the offices, so it doesn't really matter. So Kay just breathes and says, please Barnabas, please try your best. I will talk to you tomorrow, so bring the message tomorrow. I live at the school now, please come to the school. No matter what you do, please bring my message to the castle. And then he asks what he can do for Barnabas, so Barnabas is more motivated. Barnabas just says, oh, greetings from my sisters, I forgot. And then Kay says, okay, greetings back to your sisters. So obviously the sisters are kind of interested in Kay. Then Kay is motivated again because he feels like he has instilled a kind of motivation into Barnabas. So Barnabas leaves and Kay and the assistants go to the bridge inn. Any kind of authority or like a speck of success that Kay built up in the last 2 chapters is now totally gone. Because the most powerful person we know up until now, Clem, avoided Kay just to write him a letter that says, I don't know what you're doing and like you're super worthless to me. Of course indirectly, but he shows that the whole surveyor topic, Kay's life, he's not really informed about it and he's just saying anything. And then he learns that like everyone is his enemy, whether they want to or not, just because the way they understand the system. And that Barnabas's family, even though everyone else seems to hate them, is his best way into the castle or to explain his circumstances, because these people seem sympathetic towards him. And even though Kay hasn't won anything, he kind of tricks himself into making progress. He has every reason to be down, to be sad at this point. But because he feels like if somebody would have talked to him the way he talked to Barnabas, would make him motivated, he feels like that's enough. Because he set this fixed point and tells Barnabas, you have to come to me tomorrow with a new message. He feels like he's making progress, but honestly, we're still where we were in the beginning. Kay and the assistants arrive at their new home, the school gym. But it's not really a home. Gym equipment hanging from the ceiling and standing around. It's super cold because the school teacher locked all the firewood in a shed and didn't leave the key. Frida and Kay have no beds and Frida is distraught over the situation. She's holding back tears. She reached the bottom. They then have a small dinner. Frida and Kay are sitting around the table. The assistants sneaking around hoping that they can get one more bite. Frida thinks this is funny, them like sneaking around like little dogs, and laughs at them. And this is kind of the last straw for Kay. And he starts finally discussing with her what the role of the assistants is and how she feels towards the assistants, and says that they are the biggest reason for their circumstances and that the assistants are dragging him down and weigh on him and make his life miserable. Frida's more understanding. She says that the boys are from the castle and they have never seen the outside world and they can't do no better. So one should rather laugh at them than scold them at every given moment. But she obviously doesn't want to argue with Kay. So she says that she understands, but that she doesn't know of a way to get rid of them. She also admits that she thought about it and that it is weird for her to stay with 2 young men. I believe they're like around 18, 20, something like that. And that she's constantly left alone with them and that they look at her in a weird way. That in the future she will look out to be not as open and not laugh at them or touch them in any way. And Kay is satisfied with this. He's asking for an axe, so they search for one, they find one, and Kay goes out and breaks the lock on the shed with the firewood and tells the assistants to heat up the place. So they get some firewood, heat the oven, and then they all lay down to sleep. Later in the night, Kay wakes up because there's like a weird movement around him. He tries to touch Frida and then realizes that it's an assistant. Super mad, he punches him in the face and the assistant starts crying. And then Frida comes out of the corner of the room and says that she felt a weight on her chest, kind of like an animal jumping on her. So she woke up and looked for said animal, and the assistant saw a chance to get a better sleeping spot. Kay doesn't really care about this. He just tells the assistants to stop warming the place because the oven was way too hot, and so they had to almost run around naked. And Frida, on her way back to her sleeping spot, goes to the crying assistant and like strokes his hair, which Kay hates because he feels like the discussion they had before, where he kind of protected his manhood, was for nothing. So we get to see the new home of our little family. Kay uses the despair of his soon-to-be wife Frida to push his agenda. This time it's him disliking the assistants. He seems like he's successful with that. The roles of Frida and Kay appear pretty stereotypical in this circumstance. Kay is like this cold, strong, egotistical father figure, and Frida appears as this kind, gentle, indirect, smart mother. Kay really emphasizes his role by getting physically active, breaking the lock, getting the firewood with an axe, going against boundaries that make the circumstances of his wife worse. But it's all a farce. Kay is the reason why their circumstances are so bad. He can't cooperate with the bridge inn, therefore they had to move places. And it seems like because Kay can't get a win anywhere else, he looks for success and domination in his relationship with Frida. He depicts himself as this protector and provider, but in reality he doesn't know what he's doing. Everything is ambiguous. We don't even know what the assistants are like, because looking from the perspective of Kay, they are animals, enemies, lustful men, castle agents. But looking from Frida's perspective, they are just young boys, innocent, almost like animals, small animals, but they don't seem to be human to both of them. Frida can understand the narrative of them trying to hit on her. The weight on Frida's chest at the end of the chapter might be a cat, but it's more likely that it's just her worries weighing on her. From this point on, the chapters will become longer and go more into detail, so bear with me. I'll try to fill you in on everything, but it's a lot. The next morning, Kay, Frida and the assistants wake up surrounded by school children. The family is in their underwear because it got so hot overnight, and the teacher enters. But it's not the teacher we know, but a teacher. She's a female and her name is Giza. Giza is pretty tall, she's blonde, she's pretty, but she's buttoned up and stiff. While the family tries to get up and understand the situation they're in, Giza just starts scolding them, tells them that they are lazy, laying in bed all day. Frida and Kay had no time to clean up their dinner. Giza is so annoyed by this that she takes a ruler and flicks everything off the table, and we have coffee and sardine oil hitting the floor. But she just says, I guess the school servants will take care of it. To take a hold of the situation, Kay assigns tasks. Frida has to mop the floor, the assistants should get firewood. He will go out and get water and do everything else. Before he can leave, Giza suddenly cries out, "What did you do to my cat?" You see an old fat cat on the arm of Giza, which has an injured paw. So Giza tells Kay to come over and examine the paw. While he's looking at the cat, he thinks about the weight that was on his fiance's chest in the night. He kind of thinks about how the cat must be used to an empty gym and then got scared because she encountered humans. and then while scurrying away, she kind of like injured her paw herself. While he thinks about this, the cat tries to scratch his hand, and that wouldn't really matter because it's an old cat and she has dull claws. But Giza, the teacher, takes the paw and presses it into Kay's flesh, and he starts bleeding a bunch. Giza doesn't really care about this and tells him to fuck off. When Kay now turns to clean the rest of the room, a boy comes to him looking at his wound and says something, but it's inaudible. Suddenly, the children turn silent because the teacher, the one we know, enters the room and has the assistants by their necks, screaming, "Who dared to enter the shed with the firewood? Who am I ought to destroy?" Frida takes the ropes on this one and says that it's her fault and that she told the assistants to get to the shed, get some firewood so she can warm the classes, heat the classes before the lessons start. The teacher then asks the assistants themselves who broke the lock, and they immediately point at Kay. Kay doesn't really react to this. Frida just laughs and says, nah, they are just like making a little joke. They don't mean it, and they try to put the blame on him. So the teacher trusts her and wants to start beating the assistants, but when Frida sees this, she breaks and confesses that it was Kay who broke the lock. The teacher gets furious over this, lets go of the assistants, and asks Kay how he can be a man or how he can stay there in silence while others take the blame for his wrongdoings. Kay has no empathy for the assistants, so he says that they deserve to be beaten, if not for the firewood, for everything else they do in his life, and that he just wants peace and therefore tries to avoid any conflict between himself and the teacher, and that it's in everyone's interest that they don't clash. The teacher has enough of this macho shtick that Kay has and tells him that he's fired from the job. Kay is unfazed by this, and he reminds the teacher that he's not the one to decide this, that the church warden is the one who decides over his job, over his position. The teacher then says, "You should not defy me. I remind you of your shortcomings in the past. For example, you should have accepted giving the protocol earlier. You are unwise and you do not understand what you are doing." Kay just doubles down and says, "Nah, you can't fire me, and we both know that." The teacher admits defeat, turns around, tells the children to all go into one classroom because they will be taught all together, and then the teacher turns around one more time and says, "It was a mistake what you just did." Finally, conflict. First of all, the conflict between Giza the teacher and the Kay family. She comes in, doesn't introduce herself, has made up her mind, scolds Kay and Frida, destroys their belongings by flicking off their coffee mug off the table, which breaks. She says that it's their wrongdoing, that the cat is hurt. She even physically abuses or hurts Kay by guiding the claw of the cat. And the thing is, she doesn't know Kay. This is the first time that we see her. But she is introduced as this stereotype of a teacher, and as buttoned up and as strict. So it's most likely that she just took the opinion of the other teacher and made it her own. The fact that she's buttoned up and strict also points towards her not letting stuff slide. We know that everything out of the ordinary spreads super quickly through the village, so it's most likely that she already heard about the actions Kay took in the past. Seeing her as the stereotype of a teacher, it is most likely that she understands herself as this authority that teaches children abstract knowledge, but also social and behavioral rules. So she takes the Kay family as a negative example for the children, and her lesson kind of started the moment that she came in with the children. Secondly, we have the conflict between Frida and Kay. In the chapter before, they talked about their perspective on the assistants. Kay sees them as a hassle, as an enemy. Frida sees them as more innocent and not really as dangerous. In this chapter, she tries to save Kay by blaming the assistants, but she also tried to save the assistants by painting them as these innocent children that don't know or don't understand their wrongdoings. But the moment she sees negative consequences for the assistants, she immediately sacrifices Kay, therefore symbolically defies him, and also puts the assistants above him. And she knows this because she immediately starts crying and hides behind the curtain. Kay directly says this and tells everyone, now Frida has sacrificed me for the assistants, for the sake of the assistants. In the chapter before this, they talked about it in an abstract manner, and in this chapter the conflict really began, and it will continue from this point on. I wouldn't say that there's a direct conflict between Kay and the assistants, but it could be understood as a conflict between Kay and the castle, because the castle sent the assistants to Kay, and it almost seems like a crude joke because they're just burdening him. And lastly, we'll have the oldest conflict from chapter 7 between the teacher and Kay. In chapter 7, the teacher had to offer Kay the position as janitor, despite his aversion. And he explicitly states that he dislikes Kay and feels like he doesn't deserve support. In this chapter, with Giza having so many power victories regarding Kay, so with the cat, that he doesn't talk back, that she wakes them up, that she can depict them as these lazy, ungrateful hindrances, I guess, or problems inside the school. So one might think that the teacher that we know will continue this trend. And he is very aggressive, but Kay is unbothered. It seems like he's hardened now because of all the indirect, more clever ways that people defied him, or people slowed his actions or the things he tried to do, that this aggressive, openly aggressive demeanor by the teacher doesn't faze him at all, and he gets a win by reminding him that the teacher has no power here, and the teacher has to admit defeat. And if we zoom out a bit, we realize that Kay is not in a position where he wants to be. He just got a letter from Clum, basically telling him that he doesn't know what Kay is doing. He may have a job, but his boss is his enemy, and we're not even talking about the future problems that Kay is gonna have with Frida, as they have drastically different views on their situation and how they should deal with things. After things calm down a little bit, Kay gets into action. He throws out the assistants and tells them that they're fired. He kicks them out, literally, and closes the door behind them. They plead and beat on the door, but he won't budge. He hopes that the teacher, who's irritated, just takes out his aggressions on the assistants and throws them out the school building. And he's right. First, the teacher asks him to let them back in, but then he's so angry and fed up with the noise that he throws the assistants out. The assistants first stand in front of the window of Kay, but after they realize that it's too cold to stand in the snow, they move away a little bit to the border of the school premises, stand on the wall there and shout their wishes. Kay just closes the blinds to not have to look at them anymore. He turns around, he's now alone with Frida, looks at her while she's working, cleaning up. He notices how tired she looks. Kay realizes that Frida's vitality made her attractive. She wasn't like an extraordinary beauty in the first place, but the way she carried herself really added to her whole aura. And now that was gone, Kay also thinks about how maybe her proximity to Clum made her interesting, and now that she was away from Clum, she withered away. The couple starts talking and they quickly agree that Frida should have stayed at the officials' inn and Kay should have never taken her away. But they have different motives for this. Kay sees that she's tired and has a hard life now because she's connected to him. Frida says that she's just been a burden for Kay and that she's weighing him down in his aspirations. Because everything seems too much for Frida. Frida has the idea to move abroad, to leave the village behind and all of the problems that are present there. Kay declines. He's in too deep in his procedure, in his process of reaching the castle and its officials, and he reminds Frida that this is her home and that she will never feel as at home as she does there. But Frida declines this heavily. She says that the way things are supposed to go just feel like a weight on her, very restricting, and she says that there's too much Clum around. Kay immediately, like a madman, thinks that she's in contact with Clum and asks whether she could establish a contact between the both of them. But she then explains to him that just the way things are remind her of Clum. For example, the assistants. And now the positions on the assistants kind of switch. Frida emphasizes how much of an enemy the assistants are, how they look at the relationship of Kay and Frida with envy, how them ratting Kay out to the teacher was the latest coup to try and get rid of Kay. And Kay kind of takes the position that Frida took the chapters before, and that maybe Frida is overly sensitive right now. Then again, Frida takes a step back, looks at the assistants outside the window and starts pitying them again. Kay notices this and reminds Frida that she's the one who is sympathetic towards the assistants and that it may not be the assistants' fault. Frida, on her end, gets a little frustrated with this and says that that's exactly the problem. She doesn't say that Kay doesn't understand, but she kind of alludes toward it. She feels like she wants to be alone with Kay, but that the world won't let them. And therefore she'd rather be dead, lying in a grave, hiding from everyone, instead of being alive. She says that sometimes when she looks at the assistants, she sees Clum in their eyes, and she doesn't know how she feels about this. She kind of feels a yearning, she feels observed, and at the same time she doesn't know for sure whether it's a good idea to get rid of them or to let them stay. To be negligent with the assistants and to cast them out is almost like casting the castle out or something like that. She's not sure. Kay promises that from now on everything will get better, but that he also feels like Frida is not wholly his, that he feels terribly alone at times. But after they can get deeper into his emotions, he just says that he'd like to eat, to have breakfast, and he cancels the whole conversation. Then it knocks on the door. It's the boy from before that tried to talk to Kay when he got hurt by the cat, but what he said was inaudible. He introduces himself as Hans Brunswick, the son of Otto Brunswick, who is the shoemaker, like the big shoemaker in the village. And he says that he would like to help, but in a very general way. So whatever Frida and Kay need help with, he would assist them if it is in his powers. They talk for a while. Frida believes that the child is super cute. Kay just makes small talk with him until he realizes the child is the child of the pale and sickly looking woman from the beginning. The woman that said, "I'm a girl from the castle," right at the beginning. And with that, Kay sees another chance of having a shot at establishing connections to the castle. And now the child becomes a means to an end. He talks to the child, tries to find out as much as he can about his house, his parents, his family. He realizes that the father is very fond of the mother, of course, and that he tries to protect her from everything and everyone, that the mother is very sensitive to everything and always seems sick in a way, that she'd like to know about things, she doesn't like surprises, and that the child is very fond of her mother and also wants to protect her, even from the father. Frida starts getting quiet, just listening to how Kay talks to the child. And at the point where the conversation seems to almost stop, Kay emphasizes his medical knowledge. He tries to appeal to the child and his worries towards his mother. He then twists and turns it in a way where the child asks him to go to his house to look at the condition the mother has. So they continue to plot, and in 2 days he's supposed to come to their house and talk to the mother. Kay wants to talk to the mother to go to the castle, and the child wants him to talk to the mother so she'll get healthy again. In 2 days is very specific because the father, the old Brunswick, then has like a meeting at the officials' inn, and therefore he can't get angry at Kay or the son. At the end of the conversation, Kay asks the child what kind of grown-up he wants to be in the future, and he says, just like you, because right now you're a nothing, you're a nobody, but I feel like you have a lot of potential to grow into someone special, which shows the weird power dynamic and the dynamic of the whole conversation, because the child seems way more mature than one would imagine, but then in other moments he's very childish and doesn't realize that he's toyed with. Frida is super taken aback by this, but it also encapsulates how one might feel about Kay as a protagonist or as the main character that is striving towards something that we as well believe that at some point he may reach his goal. But after all is said and done, the child leaves. Another thing I have to add here, when it knocks on the door and Kay doesn't know who's there, he immediately jumps up and shouts Barnabas because he's waiting for the message. Frida is not happy with that. Then we get a small visit from the teacher who says that Kay's supposed to get food from the bridge inn. Kay wants to emphasize his earlier victory and makes the teacher admit that he's not fired. So we have like a little bit of like male ego contest. But the teacher leaves and then that is done as well. Now Kay and Frida are alone again. And Frida opens up to Kay that she noticed something about him. She also admits that the hostess at the Bridge Inn talked to her very intensely and warned her of Kay. That she thought that the hostess was just overly cautious and not fond of strangers in the village. But after Frida listened to Kay talk to the boy, she feels like there is some truth to it. The hostess told Frida that Kay just is interested in Frida because she was easy to have in that moment, that he wanted to stay at the officials' inn and she was the best chance of achieving that, and that also he tried to establish some kind of connection between Clem and himself. And he tried to do this by having the same woman. Frida didn't take that part too serious, but what she understood is that Kay had big aspirations and that he was willing to take every measure available to him to achieve that. Kay answers that the hostess is a smart woman and that to be cautious is good, but that the hostess is also misjudging the relationship of Frida and Kay. Every warning of the hostess is only true if you don't believe in the love Frida has for Kay. To paint Kay as the great manipulator is the same thing as painting Frida as the weak victim. So Kay here tries to appeal to the self-image of Frida and of her sense of superiority that she had in the beginning. He also reminds Frida that his struggle is also her struggle, that everything he achieves for the both of them. Frida then emphasizes how manipulative Kay talked to the child to get to the mother, but Kay also reminds Frida that she knows how hard it is to climb at the social ladder and that she herself, by being Clem's mistress and working at the bar at the officials' inn, tried to climb this social ladder and took every measure and every possibility that she had. Frida then says that Kay doesn't trust her because he never tells her where he goes or what his plan is. And then Kay victimizes himself and says that if he had to share every loose and every shortcoming of his, he would not be able to live with Frida as like a happy, proud man. And because he has no arguments left, he cuts the dialogue short and says that he has to leave to get lunch. Frida believes that the cycle is starting again with him just leaving and not being very honest, and really begs him to stay, but he doesn't really care and he leaves and tells her that he'll be home soon. Outside, he sees that one of the assistants left and that only one is there begging. He threatens the remaining one in passing. Frida, behind him, opens the window to let some air in, and immediately the assistant hurries towards her. She then closes the window. This chapter is massive. We have two dialogues of Frida and Kay, the conflict between the teacher and Kay continuing. We finally have a direct conflict with the assistants because Kay throws them out, and we learn a little bit about the inner workings of our main characters. Finally, Kay decides to cast out the assistants. The assistants become the symbol of observation of Kay's actions and the longing for Frida as some kind of treasure. But two questions still remain. Do the assistants only want to stay with Frida? And what is their motive? We learn about Frida's emotions. She's anxious and she feels alone. At one point, Kay was this outcast, stranger that she could attach to because she felt like she had no place. But Kay stayed a stranger, even in their relationship. The assistants for her are curse and blessing at the same time. On one hand, they're innocent and they make her laugh, but on the other hand, they always remember her of the omnipresence of the castle. When she now tries to leave in any way possible, she's held back by the man who promised her that they'll get out there, because he's in too deep into his struggle. We also get to see Kay's manipulative tactics on full display, and we see that he has no real boundaries or like ethics. He doesn't shy away from manipulating the son to get to the mother. He doesn't care that she's sick and that he's kind of playing with the worries of the child. And as always, he uses his classic technique of making other people ask him to do something, which until now almost every time backfired because people afterwards realize how he made them do something that they will regret. This gives also rise to a very interesting dialogue between Frida and Kay, where Frida openly talks about her worries and her critique of Kay. We get an indirect display of power of the hostess from the Bridge Inn because her takes get presented through Frida. She also fed into the insecurities of Frida, but Frida herself also has some good takes. She sheds a light on how consumed Kay got into castle affairs and that he's in this never-ending struggle for fleeting power that he doesn't really know whether it's power or not. Kay's answer to this is merely him saying that he's the victim and that Frida doubting him makes him feel super alone, and then because he realizes how weak these arguments are, he just cuts the dialogue short. While Frida has the task of bathing the cat of Giza the teacher, a new character shows up. Or it's more an old character that we most likely don't remember. His name is Schwarzer, who's a young aristocratic man and the man who doubted Kay's legitimacy in chapter number 1, the one who called into the castle. He gets introduced for no apparent reason. We get a little bit of background for him. He's the son of a castellan, so some minor official aristocratic person from the castle. But Schwarzer lives in the village because he fell in love with Giza the teacher. But Giza the teacher, stiff and buttoned up as she is, doesn't openly accept this love. She just kind of lets him stay in her proximity. He just hangs around and has no real job. Daily you get messages asking him to go back to the castle. Sometimes he just sits with Giza in silence and corrects examinations and like tests. But most of the time Giza's just staying at home, reading, hanging out with the cat. And Schwarzer is perusing around the village, sometimes waiting in front of the door of Giza, listening intently to the silence that comes from her hanging out. But he doesn't really do anything, and then we move on to Kay again. Kay notices that Schwarzer enters, and we kind of get his take on Schwarzer, that he feels like Schwarzer owes him because he's the starting point for Kay's struggle. Kay before just went outside to like get rid of the snow on the school premises because that's his job now. But he's really waiting for Barnabas, and he didn't want to meet Barnabas inside the school because then it would just make Frida sad and kind of add to her point. But Barnabas, as expected, doesn't show up. So at some point when it gets a little darker, Kay just leaves and runs to Barnabas's house because he's so excited. He knocks on the door, he enters. Inside he sees the two parents of Olga, Barnabas and Amalia that just passively sit in the corner. Olga is not there, Barnabas is not there, but by the oven under some blankets he meets Amalia, the youngest out of Barnabas's family. She tells Kay that Barnabas hasn't come back from the castle yet and that Olga is in the yard chopping firewood. Kay then immediately says that he has to leave back home, but Amalia asks him whether he wants to stay and wait for Olga so they can talk. Kay is surprised by this and asks whether Olga has some special message for him. Amalia just nods and smiles. This makes Kay insecure. He then emphasizes that he has a wife to get back home. Amalia is confused by this, says that she doesn't know anyone called Frida and that she didn't know that he had a wife, that Kay should tell Olga, his sister, that he's engaged because Olga obviously is in love with Kay. Kay is very confused by the way Amalia carries herself. She seems to be above everyone else. She seems to radiate this kind of longing for solitude. She seems very sure of herself, doesn't talk much, but when she talks, she really tries to make a point. Kay misreads this as official authority or like aristocratic backgrounds, but Amalia denies that she has any connection to the castle when Kay asks her. And Amalia just ends the conversation by not answering anymore. She then turns towards the parents in the corner. And Olga enters the shed. Olga immediately inquires about Frida, and Kay kind of goes into unnecessary detail to make sure that Olga gets the nature of his relationship with Frida. While embellishing and talking without thinking, he makes the mistake of inviting Amalia and Olga to their new home in the school. Amalia sees a chance to have a little fun with Kay and immediately accepts. Kay then takes a step back and immediately says that it was a mistake and that he didn't really want to invite them in the first place, but instead of admitting that it's his problem or that he made a mistake, he blames it on the ominous hostility between Frida and the Barnabas family. This brings Amalia into action, and she explains that Frida has no opinion of her own and that it's just a general opinion regarding Barnabas's family, and that there is no hostility but just like a mob mentality towards Barnabas's family. She then orders Kay to leave their shed to go back to his wife, but that in the future Barnabas will no longer bring messages to him, so Kay has to visit Barnabas's family more often. Kay then tries to twist her words and depicts it in a way that Amalia is patronizing towards her older brother. And to a degree that's true, because Amalia has this authoritarian, sovereign kind of tone that she talks with. Amalia is having none of it and tells Kay to stay silent. She literally orders him to stay silent. She explains that her brother's business is her brother's business, that she doesn't want to do anything with it, that she knows no details, but that she won't continue this conversation, and that if Kay wants to talk about the business of Barnabas and castle business, he should turn towards Olga because she's the confidant of Barnabas. And Amalia then just leaves and prepares food for the parents. This chapter is a mixed bag. So the chapter starts off reintroducing a character from the beginning. So Schwarzer, we get a little bit of background on him, but it's not really clear why. It just kind of adds to the world building, I guess. Then we turn towards Kay again. We learn about his stressed out state of mind because he runs to Barnabas. Then another character gets introduced, Amalia, the youngest child of the Barnabas family, and she's a special one. She's the main caretaker of the parents. She radiates a unique sense of beauty and authority. She speaks with conviction and communicates a kind of melancholy. Kay's usual tactics don't work with her, and her statements are very calculated. To me, she's the most interesting character, and she leaves us with a cliffhanger for the next chapter and the next video, as she refers Kay to Olga to talk about the castle. And with that, I thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next part.